welcome back to Accelerate Bio, which is the podcast where we explore the frontier of decentralized science, biotech, and the future of health. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Biohacking and Data Lake. And today we'll be diving into the intersection of venture capital, Web3, and the future of personal health with Union Square Ventures. Joining us are going to be Grace and Nikhil, which are investors at USV, one of the most forward-thinking VC firms in the space, I dare say. But well, you will see after this episode what I'm talking about. USV has backed cutting-edge projects in Web3, health, biotech, and more, and they're definitely shaping how capital flows into the next wave of human enhancement tech. So I will let you guys introduce yourself in a second, but before we begin, from the hosts, Wojciech, how's it going? Any news from Data Lake that you want to share?
Good, good. To be frank, not much. Building in healthcare and biotech takes time. So unfortunately or fortunately, not every week we are gonna have something, massively exciting to share. So we are just, keeping in our lane. All good, buddy. How are you?
On remote. Yeah, we've been busy. I'm in Austin right now for various reasons. One of them is attending South by, so you can actually find me walking around with a huge Biohacker DAO sign and having conversations with a lot of fun and interesting people in the space and outside the space. So
Amazing.
I,
Actually,
I
this weekend I'm going to be privately visiting a country music festival in London, almost like Austin.
that sounds great. Nice, have fun. Um, and yeah, let's just begin. So, hi Grace, hi Nikhil, how is it going today?
Doing great. Thank you for having us. Great to be here.
Likewise.
Um, Thank you for being here. So, maybe just for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Union Square and like what is the edge that you guys have over the rest of the venture space?
Sure. Maybe we can start by introducing ourselves and then can jump
Also,
into that.
please, yes.
But I'm Grace. I'm an investment analyst here at USV. I've been here for just over 2 years now, and spend a lot of time on sort of the applied AI layer, looking at a bunch of things from learning to commerce, but spend a large amount of my time thinking about the intersection of AI and personal healthcare. And Before this, I was at Bain for a couple years as a consultant and actually did a tour of duty in our biotech practice. And so saw kind of firsthand what like a large conglomerate biotech looks like from the inside and how slow they can be, I suppose, to innovate. And so it's very interesting now to be on the other side of it in venture. And I'll pause there and hand it over to Nikhil.
Hey, thanks for having us. Similar to Grace, I'm an investment analyst here at USV. Been here about 2 years. And prior to USV, I came in with a pretty software-heavy background. I was an engineer for about 4.5 years at small and large companies. And at USV, it's been really fun to kind of broaden from pure software into a lot of the intersections. A lot of this is, for me, coming from a little bit of a crypto background. I spent a lot of time in crypto, and so one tack on that is just a lot of the intersections where crypto sits with other categories, and hopefully we'll get to dive into that today a bit with a lot of the decentralized science stuff. But that's also kind of intersections of crypto and climate and crypto and AI, and other intersections as well. Between bio and climate and bio and AI, and I think we'll dive into all of that. And so I think that's kind of defined where the firm broadly, and also where I've gotten to spend time the last year, is touching these kind of weirder intersections of technologies.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you also asked about USV a bit, so I can kind of tee that off as well. Um, just for context, so USV is a generalist fund, been investing for 20 years. Started out kind of towards the application layer of the internet in the '04 era, migrated towards doing a lot of the enabling layer of the internet in kind of the '08 to 2012 era, and then continued to build on those two themes for the following 10 years. A lot of that was the emergence of crypto for the last decade, but also the emergence of other trends, like the importance of personal brands, the importance of access to care. And so, USV tries to be a very thesis-driven firm, and we've had kind of guiding theses for the last 20 years. And I think Grace can maybe tell us a little bit more about our most recent thesis.
Yeah, I think you asked sort of what gives us the edge.
Sorry to jump in, but if
Yeah.
you're not talking, can you mute yourselves because there's a little bit of a white noise in the background? Thank you.
You asked what gives us the edge, and I think one of the things that we think makes us unique is we do have this sort of thesis-driven ethos to the firm, and so our overarching thesis is that we like to invest at the edge of large markets that are being transformed by some kind of technological or societal pressure. And I think like one of the key words in all of that is edge, and it really means that we like to look for non-obvious, almost like Trojan horse go-to-markets, where you can really take a large market that functions in a certain way and sort of like slide into it in a way that bypasses traditional gatekeepers, maybe makes a product more direct, and as a result can really kind of change it from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. So we were early investors in Twitter, and I feel like Twitter is a good example of that, where it really sort of fundamentally changed like the news and media industry. But it kind of didn't look like that at the beginning. It looked sort of quirky and weird and a little strange. And so in any market we look at, and we're generalists, so we do crypto, we do health, we do climate, we like to look for these sort of edgy, quirky approaches, and can jump into what that means in a health context. But and also just really paying attention to both technological innovations and sort of weird, funky societal behaviors that we think are going on, and try and pull on that string and let that lead us to interesting investments.
I like the word edge, and I like you talking about weirdness. I think we're weird, you guys at Data Lake are definitely weird. But indeed, that's how we begin. That's how
Thank
we
you,
build.
sir.
That's how we build a cat-like community that then grows into something more. And you already gave us a lot to double click on in there. So how should we begin? You guys mentioned your previous experience in like the traditional biotech side of things. So maybe we could start there. Like, how does the industry, the biotech and health industry, work at the moment in the traditional sense? And then, what's your thesis on, yeah, like where the weirdness lies at the moment, and what are some of the ways people are thinking it? And then maybe we can dive into crypto after that. But let's just start here.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Well, I'll also take one step back and just note that at USV, we're generalist investors, and we've spent a lot of time in healthcare over the last 2 decades. But I wouldn't say that we've invested much in traditional, biotechnology, therapeutics. In fact, the first deal the firm ever did in that category, we did 2 months ago, or maybe 3 months ago, and we see that as kind of like a stepping stone to doing a lot more in the space. But I'll also just kind of give that disclaimer that we're not experts in biotech, and a lot of this is a newer exploration for us in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of my backdrop. But then to answer your question, I think the reason we sort of like edge approaches is that well, for one, they're kind of often how we see these kind of industries start to invert themselves is they start from a very weird and edge place. But also it allows for a lot of kind of freedom in mobility for a startup, right? It's like in healthcare, there's a lot of interesting businesses that are built going very direct to the traditional gatekeepers in the industry. And this is often like larger hospital systems, or in the case of bio, it's the large pharma companies. And there's certainly money to be made there, but it's also kind of hard to reshape an industry, and when you're kind of going directly selling and enabling these existing incumbents. And so I think I guess my starting point for thinking about where we are with traditional healthcare, traditional bio, and where we want to go is trying to find approaches that can gain traction, whether it's starting with smaller institutions or even individuals. And we kind of wrote about this a year ago when we talked about healthcare at the edge, which is a lot of like the kind of personal empowerment that we're seeing in healthcare. And that's probably one of the most interesting and growing mainstream trends in healthcare is the broader self-directed movement, which is a lot of what, I guess Biohacker DAO is getting at as well. I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, Grace.
Yeah, I think, and I'm certainly not an expert in sort of in pharma, but my time before USV, I think what I saw was you have this very sort of bloated organization where you have sort of like the research arm, and then you have some folks in the middle that are about, manufacturing and making the drug and getting it through trials. And then you sort of have the commercial folks on the end, and they're trying to sell it. And often those two sides rarely speak. So you have very smart people on either end, but they have wildly different incentives. And ideas on what therapeutics and drugs make sense to bring to markets. And it's a very slow process. Sometimes drugs get made, and once they're finally out of the pipeline, no one really needs them, or they've completely marketed it wrong, or the pricing's wrong. And so I think Genentech was one of like the first huge startup successes. I think Kleiner Perkins invested in the 70s, and it was a major outcome. So we certainly don't mean to belittle the pharma industry, but I think we can see that model is no longer working, or is sort of been, it's starting to crumble a little bit from within. So we're very interested in these approaches that can move much faster, more nimble, can be more direct, can circumvent traditional pharma, traditional gatekeepers. And I think you're just seeing on the consumer side of healthcare so much frustration. United Healthcare was only a couple months ago, and that really speaks to the zeitgeist of where healthcare is in the US. And you're also seeing a ton of behavior change. Biohacking has been around for a while, but Brian Johnson really has brought it into the zeitgeist in a way that I think is transformative and feels a little bit like a watershed. And so we're really trying to pay attention to that kind of behavior change, and are interested in investments that can really kind of leverage that. And of course, too, all of the technological transformations that's been happening around CRISPR and protein modeling. And so, yeah, there are a ton of edges. To bring it back to your question on which to enter this from, and we're excited about a lot of them.
So there's a lot to unpack here, but I think that what's really interesting to kind of double click on is this emerging edge in the area of consumer healthcare, right? Because the way I see it, I'm a medical doctor by training, and the way I see us as medical doctors, we are really failing patients in kind of owning the preventive medicine, biohacking, or self-quantification space, right? There's no specialization for preventive medicine. Doctors are not really an authority in that area. Healthcare systems are not really designed for reimbursing and payment for preventive interventions. So the way I see it is that there's a vacuum within healthcare or medical space, but historically, when that vacuum was kind of filled out by technologists or developers with purely product-driven mindset, that historically wasn't a great model in healthcare, right? Who do you think will be uniquely positioned to capture that niche? Is that going to be, the weirdness out of crypto, the grassroots movement of BioDAOs, or is that going to come more from the traditional healthcare sectors of doctors stepping up to the needs of their patients and becoming more involved? Or perhaps it's going to come from the wellness space, nutritionists, personal coaches, trainers. What are your thoughts about predictions for development of that niche?
It's just super fun to make predictions. Let's let's see where to start. Um, well, I think, you know, one thing that USV is kind of focused on in the, I guess if you're kind of one lens of your question is, who's well positioned, who's going to win. I think USV spent a lot of time in the mid 2010s thinking about how brands develop, how brands evolve, what it means to become a trusted brand, and a lot of health boils down to trust. That used to be for us our doctors, and if you have a doctor you like and you trust, that's extremely sticky. They'll kind of always stick with you, and so much of being able to make the healthcare system more accessible and work for us better is, making it more digital, making it in the future AI native, but also still having a strong layer of trust. And so when I look at kind of everything emerging, you see people like um, like Brian Johnson, and you see people like Atia, and you see all these personalities. And honestly, a lot of what they're building is kind of trust around both their methodologies and kind of their rhetoric. And it's been cool to see projects like Function Health grow really fast. And a lot of that I think starts with the brand of an individual. And so I think it's not necessarily a news story, but as you kind of break down these institutions and push things more to the edge, more to individuals, I think there's room for new kind of people to build really strong brands around, how you can access care.
Yeah, and I would just jump in. I mean, I think where we're seeing it now, sometimes I think it's better to, it's hard enough to read the present, let alone the future. But where we're seeing this now is sort of the function health of the world, the superpowers of the world. I feel like every day a new friend gets an Aura ring. So like today, it feels like we're seeing this emerge from sort of the traditional startup space. I would love to see doctors have done this decades ago, but I guess I would ask, if they haven't done it before, why are they going to start now? And I think many of them, unfortunately, just have their hands full, kind of fighting the front line of when folks actually get sick. And so I do think it will be coming from, smart founders, whether they're in crypto or not, whether there's a crypto backing or not, really kind of stepping up to the plate and creating a consumer experience to Nikhil's point feels trusted, but also feels buttery and feels friendly. And I think I would love to see a world where all of us have ownership of our health data and can kind of port it from all of our different wearables and really have a lovely way to interact with it and query it, and take action on it. I would also say on this point that I think we've seen a ton in like the measuring of your health. I was doing an at-home blood test yesterday that was just like a tiny pinprick on my arm, and everyone's wearing whoops and what have you, but I still think people are frustrated on taking action. I've gotten this large blood panel, but I actually don't know what to do as a result. And so to me, that feels like the next exciting phase. Who can crack that full feedback loop?
I can definitely get behind pretty much everything you said about self-collecting data, and I also agree that yes, there is a gap between collecting data and figuring out what's the action part. That's something that I think most of the wearable devices haven't really figured out yet, though it seems like they're trying. Um, and also, what really resonated with me, what you said just now, Nikhil, about like these influencers starting to build these very like personal feeling relationships with their audiences, like Brian Johnson and Peter Attia. It feels like, I don't know, maybe at some time in the past people had like this very personal relationship with their like family physician, and then it got replaced by this like anonymous obscure system which so many people are frustrated by for different reasons. And now okay, maybe I'm not having that kind of relationship with my personal physician anymore, but I'm almost having like an equivalent relationship, even if it's somewhat one-sided, with like Brian Johnson or Peter Attia, by consuming their content and really like they're putting their own face on it. So that's, I don't know, that's just a very interesting thought for me. I don't know how that's going to develop, but as a fun observation. And what I would love to double click on as well, maybe just get into the specifics a little bit, and maybe you both can tell me like an example of some startup in that space that you have funded, that's tackling this at the edge, that you're excited about, and just to give us a preview of how some of this stuff can be done.
Yeah, I think one example that, I mean, you talked about, and Grace talked about developing like a real relationship. I think one thing that has become really clear to us is that AI is kind of like an infinitely patient, like deep memory system that's going to be, for a lot of people, a core part of how they interact with medicine. And so one investment we made recently was in a company that's basically an AI doctor. It feels like a conversational interface. You can upload any data to it. You can ask it any questions, and it's pretty great. And you can and it remembers everything you said. You come back, 1 week later, you come back a month later, a year later, it knows everything you said. It knows everything about you. It was just kind of the magic of the systems that everybody's building. And the cool thing that they have is in their flow, in their loop, they actually push you out to real doctors where needed that are also kind of in their system. And so it's kind of bridging the gap between all this magical technology that we now have and the medical system. I think that's something we're really excited about. And I think it touches on a lot of what you discussed, which is how do you develop a personal relationship in this new age? How do you do it in a way where people still kind of trust you, trust the advice you're giving? Obviously, LLMs aren't perfect. And so that's kind of a fun bet we recently made, and I'm excited to see them continue to grow.
The company Nikhil just mentioned, we haven't announced it yet, but we're hoping to soon. So once that's out, everyone should go play around with it because it's a really fun interface. And I guess another one that we are excited about is a company called Sepco. We've been talking about multiplayer healthcare a lot, and it feels like a lot of folks are increasingly more open about sharing their health data, about sharing remedies that have worked for them. So we're thinking about like what would it mean to have almost like a social media for healthcare. And so this is a platform where you can go on, you can upload your supplement stack, you can see other people's stacks, you can compare, you can ask questions. And it even has like very interesting features around, to Nikhil's point, sort of what supplements can you trust? Supplements is, as I'm sure you all know, quite an unregulated market, and there's definitely the risk of snake oil in it. And so you can have this kind of trusted way of browsing different supplements and making sure that you're getting things that are that are, effective for you. And so I think we are, to take a step back, very interested in like communities and networks that can form around different aspects of the health spectrum, whether that's folks with chronic diseases where they're really just trying to talk to folks who have those rare diseases and understand what works for them, whether it's supplements, whether it's, you're caring for an aging relative, and so you just need to have this flow of data. We love to see people congregate online, and we think that creates a ton of stickiness, and so we're really paying attention to those communities in healthcare.
That's great, and I feel like this might be the right time to bring in the crypto angle. So talking about communities, and yeah, Nikhil, you mentioned decentralized science already. So maybe like, what was your thesis on all of this, and how does it intersect with everything that we were just talking about?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. Well, I'll start by saying you guys are the experts here, so please correct me if you feel like you have a different point of view, because I'd love to hear you guys' take on this as well.
We are just beginners when it comes to all of it.
We all
Um,
are.
I sort of think of, um, you know, crypto offers a handful of tools that can be powerful if wielded correctly, is kind of how I think about where crypto sits. And candidly, we've been doing a lot more, healthcare at the edge exploration, bio at the edge exploration in the last year. And a lot of the companies we talked to, they have no crypto angle, but they rhyme very strongly with other companies we've seen that do have a crypto angle. And it's often fun for us to compare, what is happening with the, more decentralized science, token organized communities that can be more powerful. And I think for me, it boils down to, tokens are a really powerful but often kind of blunt instrument. They're really effective at creating well understood, transparent incentives. Oftentimes, those incentives get taken advantage of, or kind of abused, but they can also be really powerful. That you can coordinate communities globally, instantly, and you can organize them around a central kind of organizing principle. And we've seen this work really well for a lot of folks. We were chatting. We hosted this biohacker day about 6 months ago, and we chatted with the HairDAO team who presented there, and they have a community of mostly researchers and scientists who are thinking about different research and developments in kind of like hair loss. And what's cool is they're using a token to kind of incentivize some of the participants in the network. But it's not like you're getting a ton of people coming in and farming the token, because there's various levels and filters of people who have to even be able to enter the community in the first place. And what is incentivized is like real contribution. And so I think we've seen many models like that, I think, across decentralized science and across the space that I think are pretty fascinating. It's like, how can you have kind of a unifying force to bring a community together? And I think tokens can be powerful in that regard. And I can dive into that more, but that's kind of a high level of how I'm kind of thinking about where crypto can play. And honestly, I'll add one more thing, which is, um, you know, in this category, you often see projects or problems where people are already very passionate about the topic. And I think, we'll love to dive into this a bit more, but we've talked to a lot of companies in the last year that are touching rare disease in some way. And, it's kind of interesting because people if you are affected by a rare disease, are so passionate about it, often times because it's life or death for you or a loved one or a child. So it's interesting to think about like where tokens or where incentives can actually be incrementally beneficial versus areas where people are already very passionate themselves, and tokens can maybe be overly heavy-handed. It's kind of something I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially in the biohacker context. A lot of this is driven by people who care about their own health and wellness to such a degree that they're going to these lengths of experimenting with things, of collecting data, and those people should definitely be rewarded. And I think tokens can be powerful in that way, but not always do you actually need explicit incentives.
So I can just quickly comment on that because I think that you shared a very powerful insight. At some point in life of our project, we recruited 60,000 patients through our data donation model, and we saw a common pattern that the more the patient was sick, the more likely they were to actually share their data without any expectation of any sort of gain. So we have had a lot of traction with oncology patients, a lot of tractions with rare disease patients, for example. But once we ventured more into the area of lifestyle medicine, so to say, so less serious conditions, if you will, then it seemed that an external motivation was needed for people to exert extra effort.
Totally, that makes a lot of sense, and that's cool to see that so many people are willing to contribute data to these kind of projects.
And I like how you talk about the token as an incentive first and foremost. That's a lot how we think about it at BiohackerDAO as well. I think a lot of projects in the Web3 space, they talk about the tech to begin with, like let's implement some super fancy ZK-proof, whatnot technology for data sharing. And I think that's great. Like that's gonna have a place in this bigger picture. Eventually, it's maybe a bit early for that right now, but I think starting with just visualizing the token as an alignment mechanism, incentive creation mechanism for a group of people towards a common goal, that should be the starting point for each project to approach this.
Yeah, I think we're very aligned there. But I do agree though that, there's a lot of other places that this technology can be used beyond kind of the incentive and alignment layer. But I also feel like maybe it's a bit early there. But open, transparent ledgers, you can totally see how those will be used in many, many different ways in this space eventually.
100%. Is there anything you would like to add to this point, Grace? You're muted.
That I think USB has been investing in crypto since the 2010s. And we are all very excited to see the emergence of crypto being used in serving of something else. I think sometimes there was a lot of crypto for crypto's sake, and there was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be built out. And then I think the first sort of application of crypto was very much financial speculation, which again, it's a logical progression, but we are very excited about crypto as a building block for other sort of value adds, whether that's in learning or whether that's in health or in consumer media. And so we're very excited to see this intersection between crypto and bio, crypto and health emerge. I think using it as an incentive mechanism can be very powerful. And I watched your episode with Research Hub, and I thought they were another great example of how to do that right.
I have no idea what you mean about financial speculation. I've never seen it in crypto. Everyone is in it for the tech.
I actually do have an interesting question on that, because having invested in crypto for more than 10 years at USV, I imagine that you have seen equally many failures as successes, not only individual startups, but the whole verticals. Let's imagine that we fast forward 5 or 10 years and we failed as DeSci. Why did we fail? What do you think are kind of, the major pivotal points that we need to address, that we need to solve, that we need to be mindful of in order not to fail as a vertical?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I've thought about it in that framing. One thing I am reminded of, though, is, a lot of the ideas you see in crypto that have been tried or were well funded and maybe failed, I don't necessarily think were bad ideas by any means. Maybe just too early. Is kind of my default lens on a lot of failures. And so I probably apply that to maybe this category as well. Is I think all of these ideas are like what you guys are working on, what a lot of the other compelling projects in DeSci are working on, I think are all directionally correct. It feels sort of inevitable that on some horizon that consumers are completely total owners, have full sovereignty over their data, over their health. We are empowered with a lot more tools. We can be much more preventative in our healthcare, and we can do so in a very effective way. I also believe that drug development and the pursuit of better biosolutions will come from a place where many individuals are contributing data. We're able to self-organize around trying the therapeutics and developing them or repurposing them. That all feels like spot on long term, and maybe even aligned with how medicine started, where like a full circle where we were just producing things, trying them on people, and then if it worked, it didn't. If it did, it's great. Now we have a kind of a long, complex process around many phases of clinical trials, and obviously there's reasons that this whole system developed. But I guess that's a long answer. of a way of saying, I think everybody's working in the right direction. Maybe one failure mode is kind of burning out, not in like the individual sense, but in the project sense around how you introduce crypto to the project. I think it's it's not necessarily going to kill a project, but you can often hurt the growth of a community, the organic nature of a community, how communities naturally form, if you're kind of too heavy-handed with like how you incentivize people. We've seen some really interesting projects that had really fascinating crypto incentives, but then if you don't build the system in the right way, a lot of people come and just extract abuse and extraction. And so I think that can be maybe a failure mode for a lot of these projects. And maybe another failure mode is on the too early side is simply a lot of these ideas around how we can build new models around whether it's biohacker DAO experimenting, trying to get to new solutions, or whether it's other folks trying to develop drugs. Maybe the system kind of isn't ready for it in the sense that we still don't have good enough tools that are accessible to people, whether these are open source, foundation models around, drug development or whatever. Maybe they aren't good enough such that small people can still tackle the problem in the way that the larger folks can.
So to summarize, too early, too heavy-handed on crypto, and lack of tools, which sort of ties to too early.
Yeah, I think that's how I'm thinking about it. But I'm curious to hear your guys' take as well. Do you have kind of a picture in your guys' head of why projects might fail 5 years out?
One kind of obvious angle of this would be the Theranos angle, for example. So having a disruptor, that's very exciting, but there is also a reason why we have all those lengthy clinical trials procedures in healthcare or in biotech, and they usually come as a result of a safety failure and a buildup of public demand for more control and for more oversight as a result of health and lives lost. So in healthcare, usually many failures become kind of, pollute the area for the future generations because they seem to be perceived through the lens of that failure that resulted in human tragedy, right? Take, for example, the drug thalidomide, which is like a classic story of a drug that was brought to the US market. It was claimed to be safe for pregnant women, but as a result, it resulted in babies born without limbs. And the case of thalidomide, it's like a bookcase of more control for the drug regulation. What's interesting though is that thalidomide is actually a very good drug for a number of conditions, provided you're not pregnant. But after that case, the whole healthcare industry stopped using thalidomide altogether, only to discover that this can be actually a useful compound for some eye conditions a couple of years ago, right? But it had to be a very, very long period of time, after which the stigma was kind of gone, and we are okay once again with using that compound, with using that tool in the right way, right? So I think that we also need to be very curious not to have such effect on healthcare, because time and again, moving fast and breaking things in healthcare wasn't a great approach.
Right. That's a super illuminating example and a great one. And I think it really gets at how, especially with societal trends, things are very like cyclical and maybe kind of like a pendulum. One thing we've been talking about is, and we kind of touched on it here, which is we have this awesome trend of like self-directed healthcare, and we have all of these people taking matters into their own hands. But it's also, at some point, the pendulum, if we go too far in one direction, the pendulum, society's view of this behavior may shift in backwards in the other direction. And part of that could be, to your point, people going too far with bringing drugs to market or bringing solutions to market that are not ready and untested. But also part of it could be, one thing. I'm going in a slightly different direction here, but one thing we've been talking about is one reaction to the current trend of like biohacking and taking it into your own hands is a lot of that is like people building like new routine. Like I'm obsessive about my sleep. I need to hit my top Aura score. I need to make sure I'm not drinking. I need to do all these things to kind of live a more simple, healthier, conformed life. And one thing we've been talking about is maybe we'll see a reaction to that, where society says, "Hey, wait, wait, having fun is fun, and you should be able to live a more varied life, and that is kind of the spice of life." And what is bio and healthcare's role in that? In some ways, you can almost look at like Ozempic as kind of like a what there's a partner at our firm, Andy, who likes to use this term hedonic biotech. He's like, how can we build tools that actually let us live the life we want to live, but also kind of do so in a healthier way? And so, that could be for sleep. Maybe it's being able to develop drugs that let us sleep less, or Ozempic maybe was a counter to our behaviors that let us kind of eat a lot. And so I don't know. That's another in terms of I went in a different direction there, but one thing we've been thinking a lot about is kind of how the action and reaction in societal shifts.
That's super interesting. So what you're saying is that that trend of taking matter in our own hands can also go too far, can be too weird, too extreme.
Yeah, I mean, I think potentially. I mean, I think it's definitely a huge positive. Everything in and around biohacking, I think we are very aligned with, and it's really exciting to see people engage with their own health and do so. But maybe it can go too far insofar as you know when it comes at the sacrifice of all the things that make us human. Um, I don't think it's like a binary thing. I think it's maybe we'll see people kind of react to this like, oh, I know I've been living this very regimented life, but actually I want to be able to find, things out there that let me live, the life I want to live, but also in a safer way.
I think you're spot on there, and it makes me think about what Balaji says about democratization of any technology. And like a parallel here would be what happened to news with Twitter and X. So you used to have like this centralized source of authority, like a couple of channels. Okay, this is true, and everything else is outside of that. Then with the introduction of Twitter, everybody becomes a citizen journalist. So it's similar as biohacking versus traditional healthcare. And what happens is you just kind of widen the spectrum of outcomes. So you end up with some really, really super well informed insider takes on things that you would have never gotten from like the average reporter that knows a little bit about a lot of different topics. But you also at the same time get a lot of the opposite extreme, like complete disinformation, fake news. Um, and then and there's an interesting scenario, and then that results in a backlash as well. You will have some people that will be craving for like a very centralized source of authority, and you will have some pockets where that develops, and those things will maybe coexist then as a result. And you are also probably going to have some kind of like novel safety mechanisms, novel checks that are going to emerge. Like Twitter introduces community nodes as a layer on top of it. So I feel like we'll probably see something similar, like something equivalent, develop in personal health as well, which might look very different to like what the traditional like FDA driven regulation mechanisms look like right now, but we will probably see those kind of layers somehow emerge as well.
Yeah, and maybe just one point on that. This is now, I guess, Nikhil and I sort of speculating what comes next or what the future of bio could look like. We've also been talking about biosecurity and sort of what happens when sequencing DNA becomes so easy and everyone can make their own protein model on their own laptop, and we have compounding pharmacies, and tooling on eBay that you could buy to make your own drugs, it feels like we're also at a moment where people can really engineer very new and alien viruses and molecules. And so that creates a whole nother pressure around how do we control that? How do we test for sort of strange mutants? And so we've also been seeing, and of course, bird flu is all over the news, and eggs are nowhere to be found. But it feels like that is another trend that we're paying close attention to, and feels like one that will have to emerge to kind of counteract a lot of the great things that we're seeing as a result of this technology being more accessible.
Oh, there is so much, like so many different directions now we can take this, but I feel like no podcast episode would be complete without an AI angle, and we haven't really dug into that enough yet. So, like, where does AI sit in respect to all of this, and yeah, how is that gonna shape what we're just talking about?
Because obviously AI doesn't have a personal brand. And we mentioned how important personal brand is for establishing relationship
Well,
in
you could have
healthcare.
an AI Brian Johnson.
Maybe that's the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI has had many different mutations in healthcare. We were early investors in a company called Abridge, that is a sort of transcription tool for providers. And so almost like an otter, as you're sort of having a meeting with your doctor, it sort of writes your notes for you and can take a bunch of actions following up on that on your behalf. And now we're seeing, an even more advanced wave of AI, in that now our ability to read DNA and to conjure up different protein structures is easier than ever before. And we're also seeing a really sort of like data scarcity moment, where in the same way that we needed all of the text information on the internet to train the LLMs that we have today, we're sort of in a very data hungry moment where we need more protein data, more cell data. And there are a ton of companies that are working to kind of gather that, whether it be from biobanks or from synthetic data, to kind of feed these models so we can really build what it is we want to build. And it feels like progress is only increasing at an exponential rate. So I think both in our ability to kind of understand the human body, read the human body, to develop new therapies and drugs and to test them in very quick and iterative ways. We saw a company the other day that's doing sort of synthesized clinical trials. So imagine if you could spin up your own agents and just, test a bunch of things super quickly before you even decide to progress to the human trial stage. It's the speed with which it's giving us to create new therapies is really unprecedented. And so there are multiple different ways, I suppose, that AI is popping up here. Nikhil, I don't know if you have more to add.
I thought that was a great overview. Um, I think, LLMs in their own right are already going to kind of reshape a lot of how we interact with medicine and doctors and health. USV invested in a company called The Bridge a long time ago, maybe 2016 around. And this is basically an AI scribe. And now there's like a handful of these in the market, but they were kind of one of the earliest to do this and do it well. And they were able to also really successfully ride kind of the improvement of LLMs. So a ton of doctors out in the world all use basically a bridge of software to transcribe their meetings with patients, and it perfectly packages that into the exact taxonomy. It pulls out what you might need to be prescribed to a patient. Patients get a readout of this kind of parsed, synthesized notes. This goes straight into the EMR or EHR. So that kind of stuff is going to become kind of table stakes in our interactions, which is like we're constantly getting a much richer, much more transparent view of our interactions with the healthcare system. And then kind of outside the system, I talked about that company earlier, which I hope can build its own personal brand eventually. But right now it's like, you just chat with it. It feels like ChatGPT, but it's specific to medicine and any of your kind of healthcare issues. Um, and um, sorry, I'm being kicked out of this room right now, as we speak. Um, and then sorry to jump from there. So that's kind of the LM side of things. And then the other thing I think we're seeing is, there's so many waves of development in the foundation models on the bio side. And I think we're still so early there. And I think that's going to be a huge trend that we're going to continue to see, which is our understanding of our bodies at a atomic molecular level, or even above that, is still so crude. Like so much of drug development, so much of biology is kind of trial and error still. And I think it's gonna be really cool to see. There's Evo 2 came out a month ago, from ARC, which is like an open source model focused on both at the protein, DNA, RNA level, modeling out protein interactions. And there's a bunch of other folks working on this at the atomic level, like I think Achira I saw the other week. And I think so many, like, there's 10 different companies taking different angles on how can we get a better understanding in a horizontal, generalizable way, of our bodies, at a low level. And so I'm really excited by that angle of AI as well. Maybe too early still, but I think inevitably we're going to crack that, and that's going to be really, really powerful.
A term we've been throwing around a lot is a programmable biology. What does it mean that we can program ourselves or viruses in a way that we've never have before? And we've seen this trend already in energy, obviously in software for decades. And it feels like we're reaching that moment where bio is programmable.
I like the term a lot, and I think that's exactly what every single biohacker is trying to achieve. Just program their own biology. We are the most complex machines we probably know of, but indeed we don't understand the source code. We understand like small parts of it, maybe by now, but there's so much more we can uncover and to really like radically reprogram how we work. That's definitely something we're excited about. Um, and so we have got I think 5 minutes left in our session. Shall we do maybe like a rapid fire sort of thing? We'll ask a bunch of questions and just answer in like 1 or 2 sentences very briefly. I think that's a fun way to end. And yeah, let me just fire away the first one maybe. So like what was the most contrarian opinion you guys hold about this investment space?
I think hedonic bio is probably our most contrarian, not to reuse it, but I think I love to say that healthcare needs a brat moment. And so we are very curious and interested and keen to meet folks building in that space. We're very bullish on it.
Anything you want to add, Nikhil?
No, I think that's a great one. I think it's if it resonates with me, like I've tried to biohack a little bit, and where I've come away with it is I want more clever solutions that let me live the life I want to live. Whether it's like, DHM is getting really popular, pre-drinking, or any of the other things you can name out there. So
So just to be clear, if I decide to start a small winery in southern Italy, you're the guys I go to, right?
I think that's definitely directionally right.
Absolutely.
Nice. Another one. What's the strangest or the most unexpected pitch in this space that you have received?
We met one founder that's trying to genetically engineer unicorns.
I think I know which one you're talking about, actually.
There can't be many.
Yes. But I like that founder though. They've got a very good vision.
Awesome.
I
Um,
can't top that. That's a great one.
what was the biggest hack you have discovered to optimize your own health?
I need to think about that one. I would say, my health exploration in terms of hacking has been inconsistent at best. I like to try things, but I often don't stick with them.
Maybe
Trying
some Italian wine.
to Um, I do think this is super basic, but and well understood, but still to this day, like sleep temperature, it just matters so much. I just moved apartments, so I'm feeling this one acutely. My sleep's all out of whack, and it's all temperature, um, temperature of the bed, temperature of the environment. So that one feels like that sets me up best for the day when I get a good temperature and good sleep.
And I would say I switched to matcha, and it feels good. I've stopped coffee. I don't know if it's just me thinking that, but I've liked that.
I like matcha and I like to sleep in a cool room, so I can relate to that. Okay, let's do one more. Let me see. Oh yeah, this is my favorite one. So if you could if you could pick one human enhancement technology that doesn't exist at all right now that you would get excited about, what would it be? Anything that comes to mind.
Well, this one's fresh because we were talking about it this week as a team. We had chatted with a team or saw on Twitter basically a team that's working on, um, letting you sleep less. This is like a therapy that would kind of let you feel like a lot of people have a genetic variant that lets them sleep less, and so it's kind of going after that idea to expand that opportunity to more people, and that would change the game for me, I feel like.
And mine would be a pill that goes to the gym for me. Similarly, just I enjoy it, but it takes up so much time, and I would love just a gym and a pill.
I like how basically both of you described something that's gonna save you a lot of time from looking after yourself. Um, awesome. We're basically at the end of our session. This has been amazing. I learned a lot here. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you guys would like to share with our audience that we haven't covered?
I would just repeat that we're very focused at the edge of this market, and as Nikhil said, particularly in the intersections. When you have bio and crypto or bio and AI, I think that's where we really thrive as generalist investors. So if you're thinking about the space, if you're building in the space, please shoot us a note. We'd love to chat.
The weirder, the better.
The weirder, the better. That's a nice premise that I can get behind.
And I'd also just like to thank you guys both for the time. This is super fun, and I enjoy your podcast.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks
Lots
for
of
coming, guys.